Okay, let's go. We are in the middle of Siman Kufchav test. We're up to Sif Yud Gimel. And we're learning about the actual blowing of the shofar. So I just want to go over, recap a little bit what we did last time. It's going to help us clarify everything and put everything into context. So for the first thing is like this. I have Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch here, which you don't have in front of you, but we're just going to go through a little bit so we could see it. And if you want to see it inside, you could watch the video after the recording if you want, or you could see it inside. But here's a very Kitzur short like this. The Alter Rebbe says when it comes to blowing the shofar, that a person needs to hear three blasts. You need to hear what we call tadat, 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 which means it's tkiya, trua, tkiya, tkiya, trua, tkiya, tkiya, trua, tkiya. These are the three things you need. Now, why is that? So as we mentioned, because in the Torah it says about blowing shofar 3 times. Twice it mentions it by Rosh Hashana and once by Yom Kippur of Yovel. So last week we got Yom Kippur and Yovel, we separated them for some reason. But Yom Kippur of Yovel and twice Rosh Hashana. Okay? Now, Chachamim tell us that because it says it by these three times, so each of these three are identical. Which means it's as if by every time it mentions it, it says the same thing 3 times. Okay? So in other words, whatever rules will apply to one will apply to the other, will apply to the other. So what comes out from there? That you have to hear 3 times the shofar, because every time it mentions the shofar 3 times, and it's as if it was using the 3-time terminology. Now, in addition to that, it also says an expression va'avarta shofar, or it says ta'aviru shofar, which means to pass a shofar by. But the way the Chachamim understand that is ta'aviru means that first you have ta'aviru shofar, you pass the shofar before the trua, which would mean a regular tkiya blast. And then after also ta'aviru shofar, you pass the shofar, meaning you do another tkiya blast. So what comes out so far is that you have to hear, like we said, a tkiya, well, it's basically 3 truas, 3 times that you blow, and each time has to have a blow before and a blow after. So it comes out to tarat, 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 which is tkiya, trua, tkiya, tkiya, trua, tkiya, tkiya, trua, tkiya. Mina Torah, one second, listen, Mina Torah, that's all we need. Now, what's the problem with that?
We don't know what a true is.
So the problem is like this. The word trua, as we mentioned last time, the word trua, in this situation, the Targum, the translation of trua means a cry. Now, and as we mentioned last time, that there was this cry from Sisera's mother. It says she was standing ba'ada chalain and she thought she would always see her son coming back successful in war, and he didn't come back, so she was crying. So the expression over there is, it says that she was crying like Tiyavav, that she had a yuvava, which is like crying, sobbing. She was crying. We're going to be in Sif Yud Gimel. We're not there yet. Now, that's what it explains. Now, the shaila is like this. What does it mean when someone cries? Right? Look at any baby, and there's different types of cries. There's a cry, you ask any parent, when they hear their kid crying, they say, oh, he was offended. Or if they hear the kid crying, they say, oh, he actually got hurt this time. Or they're tired. You can tell, based on a kid's cry, kind of what they're doing. So in other words, there's different nuances. Sometimes they cry more hysterical. Sometimes they cry more, offended or more dragged out. Everyone has different things. Sometimes when they're tired, by the time it gets to the end, they're just like, like someone just did, till they go to sleep. So there's all different types of cries. So the part that we're not sure about is which cry is this Yuvava referring to? Either it's referring to what we call like a gonach. A gonach is like a sigh almost, or like a more, when a person is more like sobbing, I guess you can say that's the right, I'm not sure that's the exact word, but kind of more like a groan. Then you have what we call more like a yalil. A yalil is more like hysterical. Like when a person is going, what's up? They can't catch their breath. So you have 2 options. Either a trua could be a little bit more drawn out, or it could be much more like hysterical, much more quick. Or it could be both. It could also be both. That a person, they're a little bit, they're getting into it, if you will, and then it gets worse and worse. If a kid, needs attention, and something happens to them, they got offended. So if you don't answer them, then it just gets worse. It escalates, right? So that's the way it works. So there's different stages. So there's 3 ways of understanding this tkiya, trua, tkiya. Either it's going to be a very simple tkiya, trua, tkiya, the way we know it, which is a bunch of blasts in the middle, or it could be a tkiya shmarim, tkiya, which would be the slower, more sob-like types, or it can be both of them together, a tkiya, shvarim trua, and then a tkiya. And that shvarim trua is called trua in a general way, meaning it's both of them because we separate them. Really, in that seder, in that order, it would both be one. Okay, so therefore, what do we do? Again, according to the Torah, you have to hear 3 times. And each one of those 3, you have to have a tkiya before and tkiya after. Which of those 3 is correct? We don't know. So we do all 3 options 3 times, and each of those 3 times are going to have a before and an after. So we end up doing tashrat, 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 and then we do tashat, 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 and then we do tarat, 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 which equals how many? 30. What? It equals 30. But we'll get to it soon. Okay. So far not so complicated, right? That's how we get to this is just to help us understand the buildup of what's happening here. But okay, could do the math later, yeah? But
12 plus 18. 18, 27.
okay, next. So now we have like this.
Oh, that sounded about time.
It works out. Okay, next we have like this. How do you measure these out? How do you measure these out? So over here, the Alter Rebbe continues and he explains like this, that the tkiya that you're doing before and after, we mentioned this last time, it needs to be like a sandwich, which means it needs to be equal. So the tkiya before and the tkiya after have to equal the trua in the middle. Okay? So I'm not doing this precise right now, so this is just to give you an idea before we get to the details. So therefore, like this, let's just imagine this is going to be your tkiya, and let's just imagine this is going to be your shvarim, and let's just imagine that this is going to be your trua. Okay? So now what you have is that these are all equal. Okay, I'm missing one. Whatever, the idea. The point is that they're all going to be exactly the same. Actually, I missed something. Sorry. And this is not a good example. This is not a good example of a tashat. So don't use it. I'm just using this to show you that if you're doing shvarim, it's going to equal your tuas, and if you're your tkiyas, and if you're doing tuas, it's going to equal your tkiyas as well. Now, why is this not exact? Because in one case we mentioned that you're going to have what we call shvarim, and then you're going to have your tuas, right? And that is your trua, the shvarim and the trua together, which means that your tkiya needs to be like this. Okay, oh, it looks like a road, right? So, and here again, they're going to be like this, going to make a line like this and a line like this. So now you see that they're exactly the same stuff. Now, so what ends up happening? What ends up happening is like this. In your tashrat seder, yeah, in the order of your tashrat, your tkiyas have to be long enough for the whole inside. Okay, and in your tarat or tashat, which would be either option 1 or 2, so they're separate, then it's going to be the size of the shvarim or the size of the tuas, not both of them together. Now you can do it longer if you want, so that's not a problem. We'll get there soon. You can do it longer if you want, but the point is that that's how you have to measure it out. Okay, so far so good.
Yes,
we'll show it when we get to it, so you'll see it more clear.
Is the tkiya allowed?
The tkiya could be longer, yeah. It has to be minimum.
The same or longer?
It has to be the same or longer, correct. You could do longer. In fact, some people, they blow till they go out of breath, basically. Doesn't mean necessarily it's tkiya b'deilah. They could do it for what? There's different ways that, we'll get to some of the nuances of things soon. Let's just move along over here. So now like this. So far, it works out. Yeah, makes sense? Everyone understands? Now the shaila is like this. Okay, you know what? We'll go backwards a second. Another thing is like this. Every tkiya is its own blast. And every trua is its own blast. And then the next tkiya is also its own blast. How do you separate them? You have to separate them. You're not allowed to do one long thing. So how do you separate them? By taking a breath. So you need to be taking a breath after every time that you blow. Okay? Now, we'll leave this part over here, a question mark, because we'll get back to that soon. But everywhere else, you need to take a breath. So let's say, for example, you do a tkiya, take a breath. Then you do your shvarim, you take a breath. Then you do, let's say, your tkiya at the end, you take a breath. Right? Now, if you were doing tkiya, teruah, and tkiya, so you would do the same thing. Okay? Now, Over here, we have a little bit of a suffix, I guess.
Depending if it's mine or
Wait, hold on. So this is just to keep in mind. You need to separate your orders, and the way you do that is by taking a breath. And you need to take a breath. If you don't, it could possibly your whole thing. Now, when it comes to the shvar and trua that are together, so over here you have it's a little bit of machlekes, but ikar halacha we take on that you should not take a breath. So instead, what we do is we take a pause. Okay, we take a pause, but we don't take a breath. So you'll do a slight pause, but without breathing, and then you continue. But like Samach mentioned, that's only going to be for certain times. Wait, hold on. It's only going to be for certain times. Meaning like this: when it comes to the blowing of the shofar, we mentioned that you need to hear how many times? 30. But how many do we hear on an average at Hashana besides from Mitzayim?
130.
We hear way more, 130. So what about all the rest? We do some when you're davening Shemona actually standing. We do some when the Chazan is doing Chazaras Hashat. We do some by Tilim after. We do it all the time. We do it way more. So basically the way it breaks down is like this. The only time that we don't take a breath is going to be by what we call the Kiyas Miyushiv. Kiyas Miyushiv, why do we call them Miyushiv sitting? Because really we stand. But because you're not davening Shemona Esrei. So if you're not davening Shemona Esrei, that's the way we differentiate between Shemona Esrei when you're standing and so those are the main ones. And you make the bracha them, you do the Shechiyanu. So therefore, because of that, you do not take a breath, you just take a second of a pause. On the other hand, all the rest of the Shvarim Trua sequences that we do throughout the rest of davening, over there, you do take a breath in between. Okay? Now, if you didn't, it may not be so bad. We'll see later, especially if it's the extra ones. But we'll leave that for now. Okay. So far, so good. Say again? Correct. By Yushiv, you do not take a breath because that's the Ikar halacha. But later on, because there are opinions that you should. Now, what's the problem, by the way? If you do take a breath and you're not supposed to, then you made a hefsek. Right. If you're not supposed to take a breath and you did, then you separated them. So therefore, we prefer not to do the breath right away. This way. If you pause, but you didn't take a breath, but you paused, it could work according to both opinions also. So it's the best way. It's the best way forward. Okay, now, so far so good. Now the thing is like this: when it comes to what we call the trua, yeah. So the halacha is you have to have short blasts, which we call trumitin. Trumitin is like that's what we call trumitin. Now, how many do you need? So there's a machlokes. Some people will say that the entire trua only needs to have just 3. The same way the shvarim is 3 shvarim, so the trua also would be just 3. Other saying that you have to have 9 because each shever, each of these shvarim are made up of 3 mitzvot. So you have to have 9. The pile, that's the way we pass. So like this, when you do it has to have minimum of 9. So you read in all the minhagim of different chassidim and the Rebbe, some of them did 42 and 72. I don't know. They did a whole bunch till they would run out of breath, 60 something. So again, and you'll see now, people try to do that also. They try until they mamish lose all their keiches. I don't know, especially when you go on with Tzayim, and you have to judge how much you're capable of. It's not always the best thing to do. You have to, at minimum, you have to do 9. Try to do more, because if you do exactly 9, you might mess up. So obviously you aim for more, but how much more? Not so much more. You want to try to be a chavriman. You can do 40 something, and you could become an Evan. But it's not easy to do that, especially if you're going to go on with Tzayim. You don't want to lose all your keiches. So if the truois are 9, then the shvarim, which each shever is made up of about 3 trumitin. So what does that give you? It's basically 9 trumitin divided into 3. So each shever is supposed to be 3, right? So here, right? It's not like I didn't exactly measure them properly, but you get the idea, right? So each of these shvarim need to be 3. Now, you could make the shvarim longer. You can make the shvarim longer, but what's the problem? That let's imagine you're going to make a shvarim longer. At a certain point, yeah, all of a sudden, boom, it becomes a tkiyah. So the difference between 3 trumitim and 9 is not that much, right? Think about it. 2 is 3, right? 2 is 9. So if you're doing a long one, right, that would be fine. But if you do 2, that might be a little too long. So you have to be very careful that you could do plus 3. You can't do less than 3 because then it's a trua. You could do 3 plus, but only up till 9. Once you go beyond 9, now you just became a trua. So you have to be a little careful to measure that out. So my estimation would be that every trumitin every shvarim, you should aim to do between 5 and 6 Tamitin. So think, do is about that. So do not too much longer than that. Right? Make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
So now, let me just see if I'm missing anything out. We're not going to talk about mistakes because we're just going to talk about the easiest, simplest way how to do this. What?
Saying, are you meant to be?
We'll get there. We'll get there soon. We'll get there soon. Okay, so now let's do it inside the Kitzur, and then we'll do some some hands-on, I guess you could say, yeah? Okay. So Sifyud Gimel says like this, and now you'll understand. When I read it now, it'll be very, very clear. Shir hatkiyas, when it comes to blowing the tkiya, which is the before and the after of the sandwich, the best way to do it is like this. Hatrua hitisha koiches ktsarim. The trua, which is what we call the trumitin, the regular trua, is 9 short blasts. Ushvarim, and one of the shevers, the shvarim, yasa shloisha shvarim zar chazay. You should do 3 of them. And kol shever yeh aruch, each one should be as long as kemai shloisha koiches ktsarim mina trua. Like at least 3 of the quick blasts of the trua. So v'nitza, what's the math? Shegam hashvarim heim kamay tisha koiches. The size of the shvarim altogether, all 3 of them, will equal 9 truas, 9 trumitin. Now, if you look in the bottom by the ches, so over there it says noegin litkoya. Our minig is that we do gimel shvarim. We do 3 shvarim plus umechza plus a tiny little bit. Okay, so you do 3, do. Then you add a little tiny bit. Okay. Now you have to be careful because some people do. Right, that's only 2, so 2.5. So you have to be careful that you get all 3. Then you do another little bit. Okay. Now Vizor Ma'id continues the Kitzur, and he says you have to be very careful. Again, this is what we mentioned. That shaloi laharich b'shvarim. Don't lengthen your shvarim too much, because if you do, it could end up being sheyehi kol shever kamay tisha koiches. One shever could end up going from 3 small blasts to 9, and as soon as it does that, it becomes a tkiya. If a person did that, even b'di'evid, they're not yitzah, because it literally is a tkiya. That's what a tkiya is. A tkiya is 9. For sure in the tashrat. Wait. A tkiya would be not the length of 9. Yeah. At least in the tashrat and the tarat or the tashat. Maybe not in this seder because this one's longer, but in the other 2 it could be that long. So you have to be careful. Now, what's the tkiyos? The tkiyos heima havaris pshutis. Tkiyos are going to be just straightforward black. But we say there, so therefore, we say there tkiya shvarim trua tkiya in this long one where you're doing the trua, a mixture of both the shvarim and the trua. So then to call tkiya, every single tkiya of the sandwich before and after has to be aruka long enough kamay hashvarim im hatrua. It would have to be the same length as the shvarim together with the trua. Dahainu meaning kamay shmoina aser koiches. It would have to be the length of 18 because the truas are 9. And the shvarim are also 9. So if your tkiyas are going to be as long as the middle, it needs to be 18, the length of 18. So your tkiyas in your tashra are double the length of your tkiyas in the tarat and the tashat. Right? Okay. Now we say there tkiya, shvarim tkiya, but what if you're doing the tashat? Or then your tkiya could be smaller. It could be the size of the shvarim, which is the hainu tisha koiches, which is 9. And the same thing in the tkiya trua tkiya also, that it could just be, your tkiyas could just be 9, and that will cover everything you need to do. Now, okay, in the shvarim, there's different ways how you could do shvarim. You could do shvarim like this. That could be a shvarim. It just goes and ends, right? But the way we do it is we divide them into tuhutu, right? It's not right. It doesn't just go and just end. It goes like That's the way that we do it. So each shever is kind of made up of 3 notes in a certain sense. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Okay, that will leave for another time. It's so complicated. Now about this last thing that I just mentioned. So Rabbi Yaakov Landa was a Rav originally in the Lubavitch and then eventually in Eretz Yisrael. So he used to, we mentioned him in the past. He used to write to the Rebbe a lot about different minhagim and back and forth. So one of the things he mentioned is that this is the way that the Rebbe Marash, I think you should do the Rebbe Rashab. Well, he heard the Rebbe Rashab. I guess maybe I don't know. Never hear from the Rebbe Rashab. And people there said he writes this. He wrote this to the Rebbe that uns is nita as nachtan is nit unser minig. Nachtan means to imitate. So to imitate the Rebbe is not a thing. That's what people were saying. So he wrote this to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said maybe that's true sometimes, but over here the mitzvah is asim midaraisa, and it was done publicly. And to be yoytze other people their mitzvah, it was the middle of davening. So obviously this is the way we should do it. So that's why even though people, I guess it's not everyone does it this way, but it became a thing that this is taka the way we do it, even notwithstanding everything. Okay, so should we let's finish the end of the sif and then we'll do a practice here. Yeah. So but tkiyah shekoidim tfilas musaf. When it comes to the tkiyahs before musaf, which we mentioned before, these are the ones we call the tkiyahs miyushiv, the ones that were sitting, because you're not in the middle of shmei esrei. So yeshlas is hashvarim ima tuah b'neshima achas. You should do it with one breath. Don't breathe in between. Therefore, hamakri, the one who usually is makri by us, the guy just points. But if for the makri, he should say bepav achas, he should say both together, shvarim tuah. And this way the guy will know, don't take a breath. Now, on the bottom it says, our minig is that the makri has kis might about spoil, but since he points, he doesn't actually say it. And then he adds another point, which I didn't know until when I learned this a couple years ago, that betkiyas de ma'umad ein makrin ka. When it comes to the standing, meaning middle of Shemon Esrei, you don't have a makri. So I didn't know that. In the past years ago, I used to remember when I was chazan somewhere, I would move my shtender to stand next to the rabbi who was going to blow to go to point for him. But really, you don't. Meaning in like a chabad, so there's no one else that was from or knew how to read. But you don't do that. By the rest of the tkiyas, you don't need someone to point. You don't need someone what we call a makri. Now, so when you're doing the tkiyas miyushiv, you breathe in between. But if it's the middle of davening, and also the tefillah shebelachas, also in the person's own personal shemona esrei. So here, yesh la'asosam b'shtei neshimes. You should do it with two breaths, meaning you should breathe in between. When we come makam layafsik b'neim, however, you shouldn't make a big pause in between them. In either case, be very close to each other. And if you do have a makri, which again, our minig is we know, but for those that do, they would read them also together, even though really they're going to end up making a little bit of a break. Okay, so let me show you quickly over here. So, what? Not now. Let's just do this quickly. Okay, so we're going to do it like this. First, let's do a tasha. Okay, so you want your tkiyas to be as long as the middle, and you want to breathe in between. I did wrong?
No,
I didn't breathe. I didn't breathe in between the shvarim and the trio.
well, you're not meant to.
No, well, depends.
Depends if
I said I said I was going to breathe. I think, right?
Did you?
Forgot what I said. I didn't breathe. I paused for a second. I didn't breathe. Okay.
You said you're not. No, you did. I switched to the
Okay, so this would have been a regular one. Now I suggest, let's say, for now, someone's practicing during Elul, to do it probably without breathing is better, because this way that's the main mitzvah, and this way you'll get used to it. Okay, so what you notice was the tkiyah was a little bit longer. Now, the guy has so much koyach, and they're strong and young, and they can blow as much as they want, that you should always blow the longer the better is always better. Right? Do more truas, don't make your shvarim longer. That's the only one that you have a challenge. But the tkiyas you could do long, truas you could do as many as you want. Shvarim you're kind of limited. But for the rest of them, do longer. But if you know you're going to be busy running around, this year might be beautiful weather for us. Other years it was 110. So it's very hard to you're drenched, you're schwitzing, and you're trying to. You get very difficult. So the point is that you do want to kind of minimize your blows. To conserve energy as much as you can. So you have to balance that out. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Let's do tashat. So a little bit it's a little bit of a shorter tkiyah because you don't have to do it longer. And I breathe in between. So that was good. Now let's do the tarat. Again, it's basically the same thing, just the middle. oisik in the end. But the question over there, technically you could do truas as long as you want. But the question is, if you want to use all your no, it's a good question. No, you go by the minimal kosher. Meaning, if it's 9 truas, then that's how long your tkiyas have to be. If you do it longer, it's up to you, but you don't have to. Yeah.
What happens if you're blown shipper and you like get stuck? What do you do?
So it depends. In other words, if you're not getting out the right sound and you're trying to, then it's fine. You're oisik, yeah, you're oisik in the same thing, so it's okay. So let's say, for example, it goes, you want to do, let's just say, well, tekiya would never matter, because that's always the beginning. So let's say the second tekiya, yes, you do truas. Yeah, that's just an example, but that's fine because you were oisik in trying to get out the right sound, never came out properly.
Like Shofar.
So we'll talk about that tomorrow because we're out of time. We'll talk about some of the mistakes tomorrow. I don't want to focus on the mistakes too much because it can add a whole layer of complicated elements. But okay, so we'll talk about it tomorrow, Mr. Hashem. Okay, good. 1 second, let me just stop the.
Not pause.